Hello and welcome to another math explanation video. Today I'm going to be explaining Module 4, Integrated 1. So this week's this explanation video is going to be winter themed because I'm excited for winter break and I just wanted to have a theme that went along with the season of winter. So it's Module 4, Integrated 1. So, okay, we have an index. So for each of these equations, for each of these topics, I'll be giving a math example, maybe even a real world example to get you better in-depth explanation of it, because being able to know how to do the thing as well as knowing the definition is what you need in order to succeed. So I'm going to be explaining solving for a variable, slope and slope-intercept form, solving inequalities and compound inequalities, solving absolute value equations, and finally solving absolute value inequalities. Okay, solving for a variable. So in this presentation slide deck, we are going to be covering one-step equations, opposite operations, two-step equations, and then a math example for each of these. Okay, so the goal is to get to the variable to the other side to find out what the variable equals. Okay, one step. So basically, for both one and two step, you're going to be using opposite operations. So if the number is attached to the variable through multiplication, you're going to divide on both sides. If the number attached to the variable is attached through division, you're going to multiply on both sides. If it's addition, you subtract. If it's subtraction, you add. Things like that. So if that doesn't make sense, here's an example to thoroughly explain. Okay, so 8x equals 80. So it is 8 times x, so that's multiplication. So you are going to divide 8x by 8 and 80 divided by 8. So 8x divided by 8 is 1x, which simplifies to x. And then 80 divided by 8 is 10. So that would mean x equals 10. So as I wrote out, you have to divide both sides by 8, and then you can find out what x is. Okay, so here's another example of addition and subtraction. So basically, you have 8 plus x equals 80. So because 8 is added to x to equal 80, you're going to subtract 8 from x. So minus 8, minus 8. So that would be x equals 72 in that case. That is another example of one step. Okay, let's go into two step. Okay, two step equations. Using opposite operations again, we are going to do it. Sorry about that noise. So basically, here's an example. The example sort of justifies it and explains it. So the first thing you do in this case is you subtract or add the number outside that's not attached to the variable. So minus 5 on both sides. So that would be 10 equals 5x. And the second step would be you would divide both sides by 5 because 5x is still left. So what is 10 divided by 5? So the answer would be 5 equals 2. Okay, so now let's do multiple or single steps on both sides. How do we do that? So here's an example. 5x plus 2 equals 4x plus 2 parentheses 2 plus 2. So what do you do with that? That's a lot of steps. What do you do? Okay, step 1 is to simplify. So 5x plus 4 equals 4x plus 8. That is simplified. So using distributive property, 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 2 is again 4. So that would be 4x plus 8 here. And then 2 plus 2 is 4, so 5x plus 4. That's the first step. You have to simplify, and that is basically a basic rule that you have to follow. Okay, step 2 is get the variable on the other side. This is like we were just doing. We just have to subtract, multiply, divide, add, whatever. It's the opposite of this. So x plus 4. So you would do x minus 4 to get x alone, and then continue from there using what you already learned a few minutes ago, just like I said, to get x equals 4. So now we are going to work on slope and slope intercept form. Now, if you have watched my videos before, you're gonna have already learned this, but this is a review, and you might have learned this in 7th grade or Math 7-8 if that is the way your school sets up the math order. Okay, or whatever course was before in grade 1. So let's get into it. Slope and slope intercept form. Okay, so slope is basically rise over run. Rising up, going this way. So first step is to find the y-intercept. Now what is the y-intercept? For this case, the y-intercept would be 0.5 because on the y-axis it lines up with 0.5. If we use 1 unit is a block, 1 unit. Okay, the second step would be to find the slope. So as I said before, it is rise over run. So because the line is going in this direction, it's going to be rising negatively instead of positively. So it is going down 1 over 2. So this would be -1 over 2 for the slope. Now the third step is to put it into an equation. So here is the equation, y equals mx plus b. Now what does that all mean? So basically you're going to fill in m and b. B is the y-intercept, which we already found out is 0.5, and m is the slope, which is -1 over 2. So now let's write it out. Y equals -1 over 2 x plus 0.5, and that would be the slope and slope-intercept form. Okay, so now we're going to be doing solving inequalities and compound inequalities. So what do the signs mean in inequalities? So here we go. This sign is less than, and it would be an open circle on a graph, which I will show you later. Then this symbol is less than or equal to. It has the line under it, and that means that it could be equal to the number, but it's also less. And that would be a closed circle because it has the line under it. The greater than, it's open circle, and then this would be greater than or equal to, which is a closed circle. Okay. Example, x is greater than or equal to 5. So what do we do here? The first step is to find the equation. Now, we already have the equation here, but if you were getting this from a more complex answer, then this would be the first step. But since it's already given to us, we don't have to do step 1. Second step is to graph it on the line. Put it on the line. So here is my number line, and basically this is a closed circle, as I said before, so it would be over 5 closed circle. And basically if the x is on the left, like this case, if the x is on the left, like in this case, then the arrow is going to be going the same way as the inequality, which is a good hint if you forget how to do it. And also, if there's a line under, it would be closed, and if there's no line under, then it would be open circle. That is a few tips here. And then, so basically, it's anything greater than 5, so including it because of the line under. So basically, the answer could be 7, it could be 8, it could be all the way up to positive infinity. And yeah, that's how it would be represented on the line. So more complex answers, not just bigger solving inequalities. So the problems are just like when we had to solve for a variable. You have to simplify and then you have to solve to get x or the letter that the variable is. And then the only difference is that you need to reverse the symbol if the number attached to the variable is negative. Now, what does that mean? So in this case, we would be able to do that. But right now, let's solve it first, simplify it. So here's just an easy example. Now the math could be a lot more complex, but we reviewed in the last slide of how to simplify it, and really just using distributive property and combining like terms, that is an easy way to simplify. But now this equation is already simplified, so what is 62 minus 2? That would be 60, so then negative 20x is less than 60. Now we have to do divided by negative 20. Because it is a negative 20 that we're dividing by from x, we would change the symbol to opposite. So basically the answer would be x is greater than negative 3, and that would be the answer. Okay, so solving inequalities and compound inequalities. So this is the second part. We're going to learn about compound inequalities. Here is an example. Okay, compound inequalities. It has to get between 2 gallons of milk and at most 3 gallons of milk. What do? 2 is less than g, and g is less than or equal to 3. So now let's figure out how to put that on a number line. Okay, so I've plotted it on the number line. And basically, because there is an open circle here and a closed circle, and max has to get between 2 and 3. So the line is connecting. And basically, when in this situation, it is called a and compound inequality. Now I'm going to be going over a or compound inequality in a minute. But an and compound inequality is basically where you have to get between two numbers. And it's just having two different sets of notation, interval notation together. And in this case, I did not separate them, so that is why they are together. Okay, so compound inequality with or is when the lines are separate from each other. So in this case, it has 5 is greater than a, 5 is less than a, or 20 is greater than a. Because the symbols are going in opposite directions, and they are not together like in this case, that would mean that their lines are going in opposite directions, are not connected. Yeah, and that is how compound inequalities are separated. There is an and or an or format. Solving absolute value equations. If you don't already know, absolute value is the point from 0. So negative 6 would be, how far away is it from 0? It's 6 away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 6 would be 6. So now let's put absolute value into equations that you're trying to solve for x or the variable. Okay, so treat absolute value equations until simplified as an x. For example, you're trying to get this away from the other side. So first thing you would do is subtract 7, or if it was multiplied or divide compared to here, you would do the opposite operations to get it to the other side. So treat this as x for now. So x plus 7 equals 9. Then what you would do, subtract 7, so that would be x equals 2, and then you would go back to 2x plus 7 equals 2. And then you would continue from there, and the absolute value would simplify, and you would try to find what the absolute value would equal. So 2 minus 7 is negative 5, so 2x equals negative 5. And what is negative 5 divided by 2? That would be negative 5 over 2 equals x, and then you solved it. Now, just hearing me say this might be a little confusing, but rest assured, it is nothing more simpler than that. But there is another thing you have to worry about. If there was a number such as 6 here, you would not be doing distributive property. As I said before, you should treat it like it is an x. So it would be, pretend it's 6x divided by 6 divided by 6 here. That is what you would do. You would not use distributive property because absolute value bars are not parentheses. Okay, so the last section is solving absolute value inequalities. Okay, that's long, but it's not that hard. So this is the same thing as the absolute value topic that I just covered, but with the same rules as inequalities. So when dividing by x, if it is negative, the inequality symbol has to be flipped. Okay, so your steps for absolute value rules that we just covered, but here they are written down. So first step is to simplify the equation. Get the absolute value section to stand alone. So treat it as a variable until it is the only thing on the side of the equation. Then you have to solve the equation to find what x equals. Now, here's another thing about absolute value inequalities. If, when you get the absolute value to stand alone, that the other side is negative, so the absolute value equals a negative, then this is non-accubable. Well, that is all for today, and I really hoped you learned something. I hoped you liked the snow theme. Now remember, don't eat snow that is not to be eaten, and I really hope this covered the topic for you, because I know it was very long, but it covered a lot. So just make sure you give it a big thumbs up if you thought it was helpful, and maybe a subscribe too. Bye!